For those unaware, I have the latest version starter that fits the M104. The only difference is the start wire has an M6 terminal. The original had like an M5. Unfortunately, you can't just go ahead and drill that I terminal out because it's too small, so I cut it off and soldered on a new one. I then routed the cabling using the existing mounts to where they needed to go. That's the oil level sender at the front there. I have lost or broken the original cable clamps, but zip ties work perfectly fine in substitution. So the transmission is all connected up. As far as the vacuum and Bowden cable is concerned. And then it was time to drag Old Red into the shed. I put the engine on the workbench just so I didn't have to work on the floor. But before getting too carried away, I went ahead and installed the engine mounts in the engine bay. I'm not 100% sure that I should have done this before putting the engine in. It did actually make it slightly more difficult because they got in the way. But I didn't read the manual for any of this. I just followed my nose and succeeded. So that's the two mounts pre-installed. They bolt in from the bottom and the engine bolts to the top of those. Something else to bear in mind on these M104s is these dipstick tubes from the factory touch or sit very close to that valve cover. And considering that's powder coated now, I didn't want to have that happen. So I did put a spacer washer between the dipstick tube and the valve cover. It was then time to get started on installing the original transmission cooler lines from the red car. Unfortunately, I didn't get any with the transmission. They were cut off at the place that removed the transmission from the wrecked car. I did go ahead and clean those out internally and externally before installing them. Unfortunately, I did not have new rubberized supporting mounts. I did still need to glue in that pin in the transmission as well, but I've done that too. So these are the cooler lines fully installed. You can see the mounting arrangement there. I really didn't want to try and fit these with the engine installed. I don't even think it would be possible, to be honest. Not without major disassembly anyway, or bending the lines. So now was the right time to do it. Of course I can replace those old crusty supports at any stage. And that's the JB weld I've applied to that pin, just to make sure it doesn't come out. It'll probably never come out ever again now. And of course we don't want to forget the bushing for the shifter lever. I then went ahead and started to install the engine. Having the device that alters the angle of the engine and transmission is absolutely essential. Otherwise, you're just fighting an uphill battle. I had to change angles multiple times. Although the manual from memory says you only have to do it twice, that was not going to cut it for me. I had to, mess around quite a lot to get that engine to go in, especially avoiding damage to my new condenser. Of course this is sped up, I'm not an absolute madman. But all in all, it's not too bad of a job. It is probably something you should do with someone spotting, so that they can keep an eye on any damage and make sure things are going in properly. Unfortunately, I had to do it by myself. so it took quite a bit longer. And what you're looking at here is basically a whole day's worth of work with the fiddly stuff that I had to do on the engine before installing it. Of course, I do wash with a toothbrush every single nut and bolt before putting it on the engine, so that was quite time consuming as well. And you do want to have that rag on the back there because that valve cover will contact the plastic from that aircon setup. And of course you want to make sure the front of the engine is not gouging the condenser. And then you just get it onto those mounts. I got one bolt on first, and then it was time to put in the other side. So that's both of those tightened up now, and there is a heat shield on the exhaust side and not on the intake side. That's the rear support for the transmission mount. I'm not going to do that today. As I said, this has taken me all day to get to this point, and I don't think I should have had that rubber mount installed at this stage yet. I'll probably have to take it off again because of what you saw there. But that's a job for tomorrow. All in all, I'm very pleased with the height of the car, although I'm slightly concerned it may end up actually too low. In Western Australia, you need to have 100 millimeters clearance from the lowest point under the car to the ground, otherwise it's an instant fail. Now you have to remember, I have no front seats yet. I haven't got my 10 kilograms of coolant, the radiator, or any of the engine accessories, or the fat bastard in the front seat. So, I'm a bit worried, but we shall see. I did save the original springs for that reason, just in case I have to put them back. And don't worry, those ugly wheels are not staying, they're just temporary.